Most, if not all, divided societies have also divided memories. And here I would like to give a very little example. I mean, I think all Lebanese agree that the official symbol for the beginning of the civil war is the famous bus of ein Romane, but, and I will come back later to the bus, but people, or Lebanese and Palestinians, I would say in this case, agree that this is a symbol for the official start, but they already don't agree anymore if the Palestinians who were killed in the bus were armed or were not armed. So this is just one example what I mean by divided memories. So I believe that approaches to peace building should, of course, take into consideration the present of a country, and here in this case the present of Lebanon, but they always have to go to the past. And in other words, peace-building approaches should link the present to the past and the past to the present. And this is exactly the field where UMAM is active. So let me tell you very shortly how UMAM started. I came in 2001. I came as a freelance. I came as a filmmaker, actually, in this moment. I came to Lebanon to make a film about the perpetrators of the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. And it's a very sensitive topic because we have, again, a divided memory, or we have divided narratives. The official policy in Lebanon likes to give the whole responsibility to the Israelis, which were implicated in a direct way, but the killing itself was done by the Lebanese. So we didn't want at this time, myself and my partner Lokman Slim, we didn't want, our aim was not to make a reconstruction of what was happened during the massacre, but for us the film was a film about individual and collective violence. But as the topic is very sensitive, we couldn't allow us to make any, let's say, historical, because there's a difference between history and memory. We couldn't allow us to make any historical mistake. And we were facing a problem, which is indeed a big problem, that in Lebanon you don't have any functional national archive. I mean, there is a national archive where almost nobody knows what it contains. It's not organized. So then, of course, you have the libraries of universities, but you just don't have any place where to go if you want to verify information. So while working on the film, and now unfortunately he left, but I was thinking about the film, listening to Dr. Azouri. The film is called Massacre. I'm sure you have never heard about this film for the simple reason that the film is censored in Lebanon. And here we are not only talking about divided memory, but also about oppressed memory. But I want to say some words more about the film. The film could be shown one time in 2005. We got a permission from the censorship in 2005, and it was a screening where there were around 700 people. And there were, in the public, there were a lot of survivors of the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. And I was very much afraid to come under pressure after the screening to reveal the identity of these 6 men, because you don't see their faces. The faces are black. So they were ready to talk to us because we promised them that we are hiding their identity. Another remark which came up while listening to the session before was, yes, oral history can play a major role. And I mean, oral history should, in a context like in the context of Lebanon, should give the voice, of course, to the survivors of civil violence, massacres, and so on. And we are as UMAM, we are profoundly convinced we also need to give the voice to the perpetrators. We need to give the voice to the perpetrators because on one hand, they can have, now on a psychological approach, they can have somehow, they can play in the function of relief, and on the other hand, they can help us to reconstitute history because they have information that the survivors of a massacre, for example, don't possess. So, what is UMAM? UMAM, I mean, we founded UMAM after we finished this film in 2004. And UMAM is based on the conviction that each country has to come to terms with its past. And I mean, there can be lessons learned from other countries, but in general, we don't believe there's any model which can be adopted. There are examples from where you can learn, but in the end, each country has to find its own way. So UMAM is mainly working with archives. All the activities, and I will come to the activities, are based on archives. And I mean, therefore, I mentioned the film Massacre. There are no open, accessible archives in Lebanon. And when we founded UMAM, we founded UMAM with two aims. First aim, to sensibilize and to open the discussion on memory and civil violence. And second, to build up an accessible archive. So I will not tell you, because we don't have time, I will not tell you the whole story of UMAM today. I will tell you where we are today. We started we had our own archives, or otherwise said, the archives of UMAM consist of books, journals, grey literature, audiovisual material, artifacts, documents, journals, newspapers, whatever. For us, it is important to make all this accessible, since here we are running a process of digitizing and keywording these documents. And based on all these, we have our own stock of archives. We are receiving archives, we are buying archives, and all the activities UMAM is leading today are based on these archives. These can be artistic activities, and I brought you some examples. These can be artistic activities. These can be research activities. These can be activities linked to human rights or to transitional justice.
I began by saying something positive about Lebanon, because if you think back to the National Pact, it was negating two different nationalist positions. One of a Christian or dominated by Maronite Lebanese nationalism that in its heart would have preferred a Christian Lebanon, and another which was an Arab nationalist perspective, which would have preferred Lebanon to have been in a greater Syria or some pan-Arab state. And both those nationalist positions are negated through power sharing. But what I think is important for Lebanon is that through the experience of civil war and after the civil war, that debate seems to have changed and died away. It's not the debate anymore. It's different competing visions of Lebanon, whether Lebanon's going to be a frontline vanguard resistance state, or again a more Western looking but or pro-Western capitalist progressive democracy. But yes, it is very difficult to square those circles. So that brings me on to the issue of trust, which is part of the focus of this. I mean, who would engage in power sharing? Well, nobody really wants to. No community would really choose to in a divided society. But comparing Northern Ireland with Lebanon, the Lebanese have a memory that goes back 150 years, certainly to late Ottoman times, but arguably historians would say hundreds of years, where they know they have to live together. Whereas for us Northern Irish, this is a new experience. We don't have that ancient tradition of power sharing and peaceful coexistence. So with peace processes, I think what's important for us to remember is that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But with the help of positive peacemakers and external powers, and this has been the case in Northern Ireland rather than Lebanon, you can lead the horse to water, and you cannot make it drink, but you can make it stand there for such a length of time that it either drinks or dies of thirst. And I think that's the lesson of the Northern Ireland conflict, because the British and Irish governments, having learnt from the failure of power sharing in the 1970s and the lengthy period it took to bring about a ripe moment for a second peace process, was that they should have a non-selfish interest in bringing the two parties to the table. They should not have an interest which seeks to further their own advantage through the conflict. Unfortunately, to say something very negative about Lebanon, that is not the case in Lebanon. It hasn't really been the case in Lebanon since the 1940s or 50s, unless you take the very broad-minded view that Syrian hegemony was a positive for Lebanon because it stopped the conflict, and stop it. It did, or pause it. And to be left alone is what parties seek through power sharing. And I think peacemakers and Western bodies, governmental or non-governmental, that intervene in divided societies very often think that they can bring parties together and smooth everything over, perhaps through power sharing or some other form of peace process. But when in fact the reason why parties are engaging in a peace process or in power sharing is for their own protection, and it's for their own security, so that they don't have they have safe insecurity through power sharing, where everybody is represented, and they can move forward on a basis of trust.